Hello, everybody. I'm John Lyall. I'm an architect as well, and uh, real inspiration from Martin there about what is design and what is possible with roads and bridges. And I'm going to briefly speak about what we do for the Design Council, for Highways England, to try and encourage better design. Could I just ask for the people in the room, how many people present have actually experienced a design review process? If you could put your hands up. So there's only a handful, really. And so in a way, this is relatively new. It's been going with Design Council for many years, but in the highways and road sector, it's only really been going for 2 or 3 years. And so I'm going to sort of tell you a bit about our experience on it. As Kat may have explained, we've got a fantastic team supporting and analyzing the work that Mike and his colleagues bring to us. Tends to be, at the moment, strategic highway schemes, hopefully at an early stage. And in a sense, we put together a team of built environment experts who can be engineers, structural, civil, environmental. Quite a few of us, like me, are architects, landscape architects, environmentalists, planners involved in infrastructure, a lot of experienced people. And also, last but not least, artists. I'm very keen on artists who've worked on large canvases of landscape to be part of this process. And we select panels to come forward and look at the designs that the design teams bring forward. Now, this is a process which is beginning to evolve, and I'm encouraged that a lot of the people that come forward nowadays with projects for Highways England, the design teams, are really getting something out of the process. They're changing their way they work, and they're bringing much better results. So you can see, this is what design review does, and we do like to see schemes at the earliest possible stage. And our role is really to support and help. We're different eyes. Many of the people that work, I've worked on a lot of infrastructure projects, particularly in the water industry and in rail and whatever. And I've found it amazing that in my career, I've met senior engineers who have never, ever in their whole career worked with an architect. I'm not saying that we're God or whatever, but we have a different way of looking at the world and a different way of looking at design. And together, we can collaborate and do good things. And so trying to see projects at the earliest possible stage is another important watchword for us, because sometimes if critical decisions have already been made, they look at sort of 13 different alignments and all right, we've picked one and that's it. Sometimes we can have an influence when there's a couple that the design team can't really choose, or community interest is part of it. Also, it's a two-way process. It's not just us delivering our comments on the designs we see and having a debate about it. We ask the designers, the design teams, the project managers, the engineers to test us, to ask us questions and come to us for advice. And if there are any frustrations about the process, the timing of it, or even the politics of it, sometimes we can actually help with that. And actually, because we've been there before, not just with highways, but with rail projects, city centre projects, rural projects, all sorts of things. As I say, we're multidisciplinary, and we have a lot of different people with different views. We don't, in a panel, I have to say this, we don't always agree with each other. And for a design team to see us have a discussion, a heated discussion about things, is good, because the design teams themselves should be having more of a discussion and even arguments about it. You can see the last point on there is communicating concept and ideas visually. I constantly find myself saying to the design teams that present to us, and they come with lots of drawings and whatever, sometimes you can see that engineering teams and CGI teams have spent ages trying to perfect something that's almost oven ready, and yet this is at the start of a process. And so we do implore design teams to come to us with early ideas, sketches, and options, because we can go through all sorts of things very quickly and try and set the scene. And also to see schemes at the earliest possible times, we can help. This is interesting, the benefits of good design. Most of those, I think, also after Kat's talk, are pretty obvious. But I think it is about quality, and sticking to Mike's challenge of trying to achieve much better roads, this is what we're about. I think the last bottom right slide is interesting because these early stages of design don't cost very much. Design review is minimal compared with the thing. If you can set it right straight away and get quality going straight away, it's much more difficult and much more expensive to correct it later on. The other thing about design of major infrastructure roads, and even some of the smaller things, you know it, they can become a cropper and have to have real problems overcoming hurdles with planners, local residents, local action groups, environmental lobbies, and whatever. And design review and the people that are on our panels are a help in that process, because we've been there before. We know how to actually set the scene and how to actually get over these things. So we are really encouraging design teams who have those challenges to use us and ask us questions. And this really shows what can we review. Lots of different things. And as I said before, even at the very earliest stages, sometimes it's frustrating to be delivered of a process where they say, right, we've just come from an exhausting process of 18 months deciding on which of 13 routes we should, and we've settled on this one. And then we don't really we have to accept that, but sometimes it's actually more interesting, and there have been one or two cases where the design team say, we've got 2 different routes, can we explore it? Because we do go and visit the sites, and can the panel advise us from their point of view, and from an environmental point of view, from a design point of view, which of the 2 options could be better? And that helps. The other thing, the second point here, is about mitigation. To a certain extent, and I can understand it, that from a technical and engineering and contracting point of view, there is, and I think in a sense, it was said earlier with some of the other designs, that there is a mindset that let's not frighten the horses, let's mitigate and keep things low and not create environmental problems because we're creating a road. And it's almost the guilt assumption that roads are a bit noisy and nasty and polluting and people don't like them. Well, actually they do, and they can like them. And sometimes we find ourselves saying as a panel, and this is a very real thing, that not to worry so much about keeping things small, low, and insignificant, but actually take up the challenge and do something very elegant and very beautiful, and it could be higher than you think it should be, but it actually is a better design in the first place, just as those designs you've just seen. And we've rehearsed this other thing, what about the road user? What do they see? What are they expecting? Is it a landmark thing, something that you actually enjoy seeing on your route, which you use a lot? And then there are the local residents, local workers, the people around, the walkers, and also roads and bridges are going to be around for a long, long time. So it's important to them. It's very important, and there's nature involved and whatever. and the landscape context and character. And one way to the heart of achieving a good design in a rural setting and to actually create for local people and local communities a more positive lookout on it is to really research and understand the history of the landscape, the history of how things have happened, what the soil and what the vegetation, the trees are like, and the history of the route or whatever. And there's lots of invigorating things that can really help with that. And also, that word sense of place. There are points upon every single route, particularly junctions, where there is an opportunity to very simply make it special. And Mike said this in his introduction, good design and going that extra mile in terms of the world of visual and technical elegance does not cost more money. In fact, it can save money, it's good value. What we do when we have these design reviews of various schemes, we report back to the Highways England Strategic Panel, and Mike then sends this through to government. So there's this dialogue where this is very much on the agenda for road design in the future, and this is what needs to happen. And the more schemes and teams designing roads and bridges and schemes and bypasses that come for design review, the better. And it makes it a very positive thing. I'll just touch now on one point which I think is a very positive, successful thing of design review. And it's related to a case study which is the Lower Thames Crossing, which some of you may know about. I'm not going to go into any detail about it because some of this is probably publicly sensitive, but it is work in progress. But what's interesting about it is that we, as a panel, and we've seen this scheme about 3 times now, but the first time we saw it, we were very much presented with an alignment and a series of things like this, and it's almost like you're in outer space and you're flying over a landscape, and the highways engineers were saying, and this is our road and whatever, and we go under, and we're going to create one of the longest tunnels in Britain, and it's going to cost so many billion and all the rest of it. But it's, as we drilled into it, and then, that stage had taken, 18 months, 2 years or whatever, just assessing that. I think the questions we asked were things like, have you got an architect on board? Have you got a landscape architect on board? And you really ought to. And what is the sequence of spaces? Because basically you're diving down in the chalk in Kent and popping up in the clay and mud in Essex, just north of Tilbury, and then swerving around and joining the M25. Quite interesting, but quite long. As you drive, hopefully it will be quicker than going through the Dartford crossing, but that's what it's meant to relieve for. But it has impact on various communities, both sides of the river, and for the drivers and the passengers, you see. So, so what we said, and these 2 words on the previous slide are important, design narrative. I said to the design team, tell us a story. Tell us what happens if I'm going south to north or north to south. What is the experience? How does it play out? Almost like a movie or a cartoon or something like that. And also, if I'm living in that little village there or standing on the near the waterfront at Tilbury, what do I see? What do I hear? What's the experience like? And I think what encouraged me is that probably about 6 to 9 months later, the team, they got very good landscape architect, very good architect on board, and they started producing this is just a snapshot, but you can see already with this where we have certain aspects of going from Kent to Essex, on the way, there are places where you can have a sense of place, where you get a junction. It could be a tunnel portal, a tunnel entrance, or it could be a spur road, or it could be a bridge crossing. So we have been very encouraged by that. And so we are now virtually asking, and I think Highways England are virtually making it part of the mandatory thing, is, every scheme of any size needs to have a design narrative. So for example, on this, a green bridge. What is a green bridge? You've got a little village on one side, and you've got sort of the remnants of a bit of an industrial on the other, but actually there's quite a lot of landscape around there. So tell us about the green bridge, and you've got landscape people and engineers and architects all working on that. And we've even suggested, and I think they're taking it on board, that an artist should be involved, because look at the sides of that chalk. What could an artist suggest in the cut? And then looking at the tunnel entrance. This is in the south, and this has been even more refined by those things I believe are called attenuations, so that you don't suddenly get swallowed into the darkness of the tunnel. You have a gradation before you get in. But for us, and in terms of a landscape intervention, that's quite elegant. And then on the north side, similar but different, and so there is a sort of conversation between Kent and Essex about the experience that they go through. This is an interesting one. Again, we've talked about viaducts. This is a viaduct that is proposed and has to be built on the Fenny bit as you get on the Essex side, and it's quite long, but it's in a bit of a curve. And should it be higher? Should it be have pylons or whatever? And should it be lit up? And how much trees and vegetation? We can actually talk, and there is a whole issue of using earth and mounding and tree planting, which comes into our conversations, which is part of the budget. So we've talked about this. So there are beginning to happen some beautiful new bridges happening. This is on the A14, the new structure crossing the Ouse floodplain and fens. When I first saw this as a design, on a design review about 5 years ago, we were a bit worried. We thought it might not be elegant enough and a bit stumpy, but having been there, having seen the reality of it, I'm really quite pleased with it, because the height of it and the way the landscape, it's not quite finished yet, the way the landscape and the water can actually flow underneath. But and some of the other road bridges being built on the A14 are really impressive. The use of Core 10 steel, the use of Core 10 with concrete and the way things happen. But less pleasing for us is sometimes the use of the hardware. I'm going to use the C word, which is clutter. That's sort of shorthand that we tend to use sometimes. But we do worry about it, because there's some very good architects like Martin and fantastic engineers and landscapers who are working on schemes around the country, some quite big strategic schemes. And then they get compromised by some of the elegant structures, by gantries, signage, lighting, etc., which is there because the codes say it should be there in that format. And this is where sometimes also there's a transition, which I'm beginning to understand. I certainly do understand it in my building profession, between the consultancy design ideas and the contractors getting involved, and we always do it like this, etc. So what I'm saying about that is we are working with Highways England very hard to actually really understand how the codes, the designs, and the changes can be addressed so we get better design, a better placement of it. Because this was a very elegant bridge, and we stood on it hadn't been finished yet, and I looked left and right, and there were two gantries. A, why are they there? B, they look ugly, and why are they so close? And can't the bridge be used for anything? And these debates we need to have, and that's ongoing and part of our process. So in this regard, we are seriously talking with Highways England, and this hopefully is going to start in the next year, of about having training and collaborative sessions where we don't know everything, but the whole idea is to instill a sense of what Kat was saying about holistic design, about how design produces better value, with not just highways engineers. We trust highways engineers. This is not about safety and structures. We know you'll deliver that. But also the supply chain, the people that make the components for you and things like that. Everyone needs to understand what good design means and holistically go forward with it. And so that is beginning to happen, and I hope you'll spread the word and that people will come to do design presentations understanding what good design is and also what design review is all about. So, as Martin Knight was saying, and Kat was saying, just be inspired, look at stuff abroad, look at stuff at home that you like and whatever. And we, as a panel, look forward to seeing your new designs. So I'll leave it like that.